was impressed by Hussein's flashy car. Cromitty was working the night shift at Walmart, and Newburgh is a town particularly blessed by the fruits of your capitalist system, to jest gorod północju oblażalsia. So, Hussein being this wealthy businessman, he stood out. Over the next year, Hussein repeatedly offered Cromitty $250,000, a BMW, a holiday to Puerto Rico, and his own barbershop business in exchange for committing a thing that you can't say on YouTube, which Cromitty initially refused to do. When Cromitty lost his job, however, he agreed to go along with it, but then he didn't really do anything. He strung Hussein along for months, talking the talk. Hussein told him to recruit some other guys to help, and Cromitty was like, yeah, I'm on it. I'm gonna recruit some real hard nuts, trust me. And eventually, he recruited these 3 other guys, none of whom were particularly keen, but all of whom badly needed money. Hussein masterminded this plan to plant a Feuerwerk in a car outside a synagogue in the Bronx, and then surprise a military plane with a Bolshoi Feuerwerk. Hussein supplied the money, the plan, the equipment, and the snacks, and drove the 4 of them to the Bronx because none of them had a car. Cromitty got out, planted the firework in the target car, didn't even switch it on, then got back into Hussein's vehicle, whereupon 100 FBI agents jumped out and arrested everybody. It turned out that Hussein was working for the FBI the entire time. The devices were fake, the plan was fake, the snacks were real, but there was never any danger. And that's not my opinion, that's the opinion of the judge, who said,
"The essence of what occurred here is that a government, understandably zealous to protect its citizens from terrorism, came upon a man both bigoted and suggestible, one who was incapable of committing an act of terrorism on his own. It created acts of terrorism out of his fantasies of bravado and bigotry, and then made these fantasies come true. The government did not have to infiltrate and foil some nefarious plot. There was no nefarious plot to foil. Only the government could have made a terrorist out of Mr. Cromitty, a man whose buffoonery is positively Shakespearean in its scope. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that there would have been no crime here except the government instigated it, planned it, and brought it to fruition."
Now, being from the Soviet Union, I love a good show trial. But in the West, you have these things called entrapment laws that are supposed to protect you if the police set you up. However, if you are on trial in an American federal court and your lawyer argues entrapment, the prosecution just have to prove that you were predisposed to commit the crime. And that's easy enough. If you've done some petty crime in the past, if they bring you in under armed guard so you look very scary, if you've been recorded saying awful but legal things about soldiers or Jewish people, or if you just look like a stereotypical criminal, then a lot of jurors will go, yeah, seems like he was predisposed. And that's enough. The entrapment defense fails almost every time, as indeed it failed in United States v. Cromitty when all 4 defendants were found guilty and sentenced to 25 years each in an American gulag, which at time of recording I believe they are still serving. You decadent Westerners, you think you have nothing to fear just because you didn't do anything wrong? Oh no, my friends. If you don't commit a crime, we can simply build the crime around you. Oh, I miss the KGB. Although, apparently, not everyone's cut out for a career in the secret police. Terry Albury, who was an FBI agent for 17 years, was convicted of espionage in 2018 for leaking classified documents about the Bureau's methods to the press. Of course, I had already read Russian translations of those documents years ago, but to many Americans they were quite shocking. Albury later claimed that a lot of agents get burned out and disillusioned because you join up out of a sincere desire to protect people, and then 16 years later it's 1 a.m. and you're going through some guy's bins, reading his receipts, and you know the only thing he's done wrong is visit a mosque, and it's not exactly James Bond, is it?
The war on terror is like this game, right? We've built this entire apparatus and convinced the world that there's a terrorist in every mosque and that every newly arrived Muslim immigrant is secretly anti-American. And because we've promoted that false notion, we have to validate it. So we catch some kid who doesn't know his ear from his ass for building a bomb fed to them by the FBI. It becomes a vicious circle, because the longer you look at a kid, the bigger the file gets, even if they've done nothing. And then 6 months later, somebody calls the FBI and says, "I've seen some suspicious activity in this neighborhood," and an agent can see that we have thick files on all of these kids. But the question is, okay, so you have thick files on these kids, but the files have shown that these kids are guilty of nothing. So what does that actually achieve? It achieves intelligence, and that's a nebulous, wonderful sounding word that everyone likes to throw around. But based on my experience, the entire purpose of these assessments was to create a database of American Muslims. It's a very dangerous and toxic environment, and we haven't come to terms with the fact that maybe we really screwed up here. Maybe what we're doing is wrong.
Now, before anyone accuses me of being some kind of secret leftist infiltrator trying to undermine the West, please note the two critics of post-9/11 security culture that I just quoted were not Marxist academics or purple-haired students, but a judge and an FBI agent. And when they're the ones saying that something's gone wrong, I mean, I am a secret leftist infiltrator, but I'm an honest one. I did try taking over the British Labour Party, but Keir Starmer foiled my schemes with his unstoppable sexual charisma. These two stories come from the USA, but they're not the only ones. In the early 2000s, the vibes in many Western countries were rancid, as several political analysts have said. And these rancid vibes contributed to an atmosphere in which Muslim people were seen as potentially disloyal, suspicious, maybe even dangerous, and in need of surveillance. Reminds me an awful lot of the Cold War. Muslims, disproportionately women, were attacked in the streets, monstered in the media. Many were forced into violent relationships with the state or put under pointless surveillance. A lot of people who weren't even Muslim got a hard time just because people thought that they were Muslim. And a large number of hypocritical and simplistic stereotypes about Muslims were disseminated widely.
The Islamic world never had a secular enlightenment, which is why they have such a disposition towards violence. Unlike Great Britain, a peaceful society that's never been violent towards anyone.
Luckily, all that's behind us now. It's definitely not still happening, and it definitely hasn't had any long-term negative consequences. As discussed, the post-9/11 vibes were rancid. And one way of explaining these rancid vibes is to say that people were afraid, and they didn't understand. And people are always afraid of what they don't understand. And in their misunderstanding, they turned to fear. And fear made them afraid of the things that they just didn't understand. And so they were lost in fear and misunderstanding and afraid of that lost in fear and misunderstanding. And so they were all turning always in misunderstanding and fear and lost in fear and misunderstanding. And that's why we'll always need the X-Men. And if that's true, then the solution should be pretty easy. Let's just all be nicer to each other. Let's get to know our community better. Maybe then we'll realize we don't have to be afraid of one another. And then maybe all this intrusive security and militarized violence will just disappear. And okay, I'm being a little bit facetious here. Healing and togetherness, détente, it's not nothing. But we can also go deeper. Yes, people were afraid. But why did their fear take the form it did and have the effects that it did? Islamophobia didn't just start in 2001. The anti-racism think tank Runnymede Trust published a report titled Islamophobia, a Problem for Us All in 1997. They followed it in 2017 with the hilariously understated sequel Islamophobia, Still a Problem for Us All. The philosopher Sarah Ahmed says that emotions are more than just individual psychological states. Society produces and prioritizes certain group emotional responses over others, and in doing so,